Hello and welcome back to episode 5 of our Q&A series. You guys and girls seem to be enjoying these because you keep sending in good questions, so thank you very much for that. This episode is probably going to be a little bit shorter as the last one was a long episode, some great questions. But before we do, each question is in the description with a timestamp to skip to that question if you only want to see certain answers to certain ones. And if you want your question answered on this series, the best way to do it is either leave a comment down below, send us an email at info@kibblewatches.co.uk and make sure you put somewhere in the title or in the message that this is for the Q&A video, or wait until usually a Tuesday and we put up a questions box on our Instagram stories at KibbleWatches, and that's where most of the questions come in, so thank you very much. And what's on wrist, because I almost always forget this, I'm actually wearing a really stunning Oris Divers with a blue dial, actually mid-size, around 35mm, around late 90s, automatic ETA. Is actually coming to the website soon, but for now I'm actually just enjoying it a little bit. Shh, don't tell anyone. And we've just got a delivery of a load of new watches coming, so that's exciting. I look forward to cracking on to that after this episode. So let's begin. Question 1 from, and again, I'm going to butcher everyone's name in this, so I do apologise, and I feel like there's some names in here which you've done on purpose to make it even harder, so I'm going to put the name on screen. He says, Omega versus Rolex, who would win? Tough question. I mean, what are we talking? Are we talking divers? Are we talking movements? Are we talking chronographs? Like, what are we talking here? If we're talking retention value, unfortunately, it's probably always going to be Rolex. If we're talking innovation, again, I think Rolex win that in the early days, but now Omega definitely win it with their meta certification and their sort of the boundaries they're pushing with technology. Either way, you can't go wrong with either, so buy whichever one you like. Next question from Cartier. There you go, I think that's the name. If you had to pick one watch to wear for the rest of your life, which one and why? A similar question we've had a few times, but I would probably go between an AP 15202, Royal Oak, absolutely love that one, blue dial, or a very interesting Tank Tray, probably in platinum on a bracelet, because both of those are very unusual and I feel like you could wear in multiple sort of scenarios. Maybe not for like diving or anything like that, but to be honest, I don't really go near water other than a shower, so there we go. Next question from Cladwell Joshua. What would you look for when buying a Cartier Tank? Good question and a difficult one to answer because it depends on so many factors. So first of all, I'll be looking at whether I'm looking at quartz or mechanical. And with both, I'd be wanting to look at the movement. I'd be wanting to see, is there any pitting inside the case? Is there any rust from water damage? Because these are not very waterproof watches and it can happen quite a lot, unfortunately. I'd be looking at the dial under a loop. I'd be checking, is there any flaking around the edge? Because sometimes they can flake, especially the quartz tanks around the edge of the dial. Sometimes flaking can happen. So I'd be looking at that. I'd be looking at the condition. You know, these are quite soft cases anyway, the tanks, but you don't want it to be extra soft by extra polishing. So I'd be checking for that. If it's precious metal, you know, testing it, making sure it is precious metal. And those kind of things really, you know, does it come with a box and papers? Is it necessary? Are you looking to buy for yourself, or are you looking to hopefully enjoy for a while and one day sell on? You know, these kind of things. And the most important thing is always checking the case, checking the dial, checking the movement. Always check the movement. Here at Kibble Watches, and I get asked this a few times, why don't we put the movement shots on the website? The reason being, we do the photography after the watches have been tested and checked by our watchmaker. And if they've been serviced, they've already been tightened by our watchmaker, so they're ready to go. So for us to open them again, we'd have to get them to reclose them. Can we do it on request? 100%. People ask us for photos of the movements pretty much every single day, and we provide them. But we don't put them as standard on the website, just for continuity, because some watches are monocoque, meaning they come out the front, so they're very difficult to get into. So it's just a whole nother process. So we don't share the movements on the website, but we do offer them. That was just a side note on the movement point. But yeah, always check the movement, make sure there's no pitting and rusting, and buy it from a reputable place. Don't risk it on eBay or anywhere like that. In my personal opinion, if you're going to spend that kind of money and you don't know exactly what you've got to look out for, don't take the risk. Question 4, and I'm not going to try and pronounce your name again because I just absolutely butchered it. It's on screen. Best vintage watch under 200 euros, Seiko all day long. You know, that kind of price, vintage Seiko every single day, vintage Seiko 5s. Some of the, we just got in a really cool Seahorse. It's going to be quite a bit over 200 euros because it's the nicest one I've seen, and it's going to be fully serviced. But you know, on eBay all day long you can find vintage Seikos. Just be careful. One thing I'd say when you're buying vintage Seiko is, and this is nothing against India, but whenever it says from India, just be extra cautious because a lot of very fake dials come from India. They often use fake movements, original movements, sorry, with fake cases, fake dials and fake hands. So the only thing that's real is the movements. So be careful. They do it with Oris and a couple of others as well. So that's my only sort of caveat to that. Just be careful where you're exactly buying the vintage watch from, but Seiko. Question 5 from Top Shelf Vintage Watches. They ask, when did you know to go full-time with the business? Great question. So my advice to anyone looking to know when to go full-time with the business is when you can cover your expenses for a few months. That's usually the way you know. When you're in a position where you've got in the bank enough to cover yourself for at least 3 to 6 months, because then you're in a comfortable position if business dips, because if you're going full-time, you know, you're probably early into it. If business dips, sales dip, anything like that, you've got backup, because you don't want to be scrambling when you go full-time. Now, how did I know? I didn't. I actually was pretty much forced full-time. Long story short, I had a couple of jobs, when was it? Not last year, the year before, so what's that, 2019? And one job just didn't quite work out, so I went back to my old job, and that job I basically got forced out of the doors of for a conflict of interest that I can't talk about in too much detail, but there was no conflict of interest. It was proven much later, but the point is I was forced out the door with no job, and it was right when the Brighton Watch Week, the watch weekend was on, so we were going down to Brighton, me and Antique Watch, and selling watches there. So it was that weekend I was let go from that job, so I had no job, and I was going to Brighton to do a trade show with As Kibble watches. So I'm panicking and worrying and thinking the world's over, and I go to Brighton and I sell the most watches I've ever sold in a day. It was the best I'd ever done, and it was hugely, like, just incredible. And it put enough money in the bank to keep me going for that month. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to keep going full-time for this month, and if it doesn't work out, I'll find something else. I had people who said they'd help me out, you know, give me a job, which was very kind of them, but it wouldn't have been a long-term thing. So that month came to an end, and I managed to save up enough for the next month. And I just kept going and going. And now, you know, I'm in the position I just said to you, try and have enough money in the bank to protect yourself for at least a few months if needs be. So ideally wait for that, but if not, I'm pretty sure you can make it work. You know, if you're nearly there, which I was nearly at that point, usually that boost of time, because I was working 42 hours a week there and then doing Kibble watches on the side, and it was nearly there. So you can imagine that 42 hours now free was enough time for me to boost it to the next level. So just be careful, but I'd say go for it. You know, what's the alternative right now? Question 6 from Horizon Horology. Thank you very much for the question, and make sure you follow him, guys. When does neo-vintage become vintage? What are your thoughts? So neo-vintage is this term that people are throwing around more and more recently. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know the exact age brackets, but it's usually like 90s pieces are considered neo-vintage. The reason being, I don't think it's anything really to do with the age. It's more to do with the fact of materials used, especially stuff like tritium in the dials, because tritium can still develop a patina. It can still go a creamy colour, a vintage patinated colour. Whereas after that period, we switched over to Luminova, and Luminova stays bright white. We switched over to a lot of ceramics on bezels, so again, they stay the deep black. Ceramic dials even with Omega. So pretty much these watches are like time capsules. They're not going to change physical appearance other than scratches and wear. Whereas in the 90s, they were still using materials that the bezels faded in colour. The dials started, the paint would fade as well. The luminescent material would go on orangey colour. So it created the sort of appearance of vintage whilst it wasn't actually vintage. So that's where neo-vintage comes from. So when does neo-vintage become vintage? I think once it hits like 30, 40 years, surely. You know, based on the fact that 80s is now considered vintage, I'd probably say the same. But neo-vintage is just that term. I don't really know. I use it randomly as well. I don't think anyone really knows. I think we just make it up as we go. So there you go. So as the camera lady just said, 1991 is already 30 years. So I guess neo-vintage is now approaching vintage. I have no idea. Maybe I'm nearly vintage. Question 7 from Kirsty. Thank you very much for the question. She asked, what's your 5-year goal? Great question. It changes all the time. I mean, last night I was reconsidering a lot of things, looking at everything, the business, where I want it to be, and it's changed again. You know, I'd probably say every 4 to 6 months I'm changing my mind on what I want the future for me to be. It's not a bad thing, you know, it's just a constant strive for better, if you will. So 5 years from now, I would very much like to have my own place and maybe have, you know, another property in the works or something like that. And the business to be at a point where we've got a few employees and it's pretty self-sustaining, you know. I'm no longer the face of the business. I'm no longer the front of the business. We have other people, you know, in front of the camera doing different bits, and I still, you know, do most of the business, you know, is what I do. But it also allows me free time to work on other things, because for me, Kibble watches is my dream and it's something I'm going to do for the rest of my life, but I do have other goals and ambitions with business that I want to start. So that 5-year point, I hope to be in that transition period to be able to now pursue those other dreams, and have enough capital behind me and the team behind me with Kibble watches for that to run on its own. So that's the goal in 5 years. Will that happen? Who has any idea, right? I mean, getting to where I am now, I thought would take me probably until another 5 years, to be honest. So I have absolutely no idea. Let's see what happens. Question 8 from Jamie Not James. He says, Christopher Ward, new or old logo? I don't really mind either, to be honest. It was a big thing. Everyone was getting all pissy about it, about whether the old logo was better than the new one. To me, they both look good. I think where it's positioned matters and things like that. So to be honest, it doesn't really bother me too much. Question 9 from my dad. Thank you for the question. He says, what do you do to relax outside of work? So what I do outside of work to relax, I used to read a lot. I'll be honest, this year I haven't really read as much. I want to get back to that. But I'll be very honest with you guys and girls. There is a game called Euro Truck Simulator. The camera lady's laughing. And it is literally a game. I have a steering wheel and everything. It's brilliant. Where you drive a truck around. You deliver lorries of loads and things to all different parts of Europe. It's brilliant. It's a simulator. You actually have to indicate. You have to like stop at red lights. You have to commit to the speed limit. It's amazing. I can feel everyone judging me right now. But that's what I do to relax. I used to be a big gamer, like a really big gamer. I build computers and I built one recently. You know, I used to really be into that. And I used to play all the games, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, all of them. But now, because I very rarely get to play, probably on a Saturday or a Sunday, and I only then for a few hours, you know, because of those factors, I don't really get into games that are very deep anymore, because before I used to play them every day. So now I play brainless games that I don't have to think about, and they are just chill. I will listen to Radio 1's Chillest Mix on a Sunday and just sit there and truck. It's good. It's good. Everyone's going to be so judging me for that one. But I thought I'd be honest. I thought you were going
to say about the decorated houses.
No, I'm not saying that one. I'm not telling them about the game where you literally build a house. No. That's sad. And clean, yeah. And you paint the walls, knock walls down. It's a brilliant game as well, actually. I'm not going to tell them about that. Question 10 from Diving in Time. Have you ever been to Germany? No, not yet. So there were plans to go to Germany, Amsterdam, and a couple of other places last year. Wow, it's last year that coronavirus kicked in. Jesus, that feels crazy. So unfortunately, those plans fell through. The year before, it was Venice and Belgium and Rome. So I'd been to those places and was hoping to do more of Europe before Brexit all happened and it gets more complicated. So unfortunately now, when I do finally go, it's going to be a lot more complicated. There's not going to be anywhere near as much trading because of VAT and imports and all that jazz. So haven't been yet, we'll definitely go, so fingers crossed. So the final question, as I said, this is probably a short episode. It's from Mark Playford. He says, hi James, do you still chat to Federico and J.Anthony? So unfortunately not. So Federico, for those of you who don't know, is Federico Talks Watches, and he runs Del Rey Watch Supply in the US. And both of these people used to do pretty much a live stream every week with both of them in different occasions and stuff like that, and we used to talk for like 2-3 hours just about watches. It was good fun. I'm talking 4 to 5, maybe 6 years ago now. I still occasionally speak to Federico on Instagram. Occasionally we have a little chat, and J.Anthony the same every now and again, but unfortunately nowhere near as much as we used to. So maybe now I'm back on YouTube, we'll have to sort something out, get J.Anthony on or get Federico on. It would be good to have a good catch up with them both and just see how things are, because it's been a very long time since we've done it. So there you have it, guys and girls. That's today's episode. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to the next one. We'll see you again. It's pretty much been every Thursday now, so I think we can say Thursdays is Q&A day. I think it's safe to say. So we'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to send in your questions. I look forward to answering them. We'll see you all next time. Take care.